into internships?
I think each organization probably has their own process, and I know we do too. So I would say check into it, learn as much as you can about, how do you become an intern at any organization. But that starts through just inquiring and maybe targeting some businesses and asking questions, contacting HR there, express your interest in, being an intern, and most companies will be really happy just to share, what the process is.
I will give some practical advice. Overdress for your first week until you find the lay of the land. Work really hard. People notice when you don't. Make sure you show up on time and take it very seriously. A lot of internships, as we all know, mine included, are not paid. Act as if you're being paid. People will notice, the people on staff will notice. We hire a lot of people who are interns. We just hired someone who was an intern, like their first day was Wednesday. So like that is an entry in, especially in a place like if you want to go into news like TMJ, like act as if that is your job and your job is on the line to be there.
All right, now talking about jobs, how did you all get the job that you got? So we'll start with, what was your first media industry job, Melissa?
For me, I got into sales, and sales is an interesting place. And sales, if you are good at it, is amazing. If you are okay at it, it's pretty good. And if you're bad at it, it is awful. And so for me, sales is how I got in and how I realized that I wanted to actually still make stuff, but not in the capacity of like high-level production.
Keith, what was your first
I
job?
actually have a similar situation with sales. And after graduation, I moved back to my hometown in Green Bay, thinking I could maybe get a job at one of the TV stations. And if I would have had an internship, I probably would have had a better foot in the door, but I didn't. But I got a meeting with all the news directors there and gave them my pitch. And in the back of their desk, they had tons of demo reels and resumes, and they were pretty frank with me, which was good. They said, we have a lot of demo reels and resumes on my desk, so they just said, keep in contact. So I was able to get a job at a company in Green Bay selling audiovisual and photography equipment, things like that, and I just kept in contact with the stations, and eventually a former UW student that I worked with mentioned my name at Channel 2 News, and that was another connection through this program where I got a chance to get interviewed again and was hired as a photographer, and then I also did some editing. But that was my lead in, and I left sales, which there's sales is okay. There's a place for sales,
Yes.
And in fact, I would recommend everybody talk about other classes that earlier, things that you might want to consider. But I think, marketing, marketing yourself or marketing the company you end up with, just knowing more about marketing. And which sales is a branch of marketing in a way, or separated in some companies. But the writing, the marketing, and even a financial class probably would be helpful, especially if you start your own company as a freelancer, or if you're a freelancer, you got to keep track of expenses and all that stuff. So there's some other, besides for our trade core. Things that we've learned here, there's some lifetime skills outside of that which can come in handy.
Sarah, what was your first job?
My first job, I worked in a very, very small market, obviously. It was in Whitewater, out in kind of the country just outside of town. And it was a country station. I was not a fan of country music. And I took it anyway because I needed the job, and it was kind of it was a good starting place. I knew it was a good foot in the door in the radio industry. I did kind of the midday shift. It was voice tracking. I was on air. But they liked me because I had that news experience. So at a lot of radio stations, especially if you're first one, you end up, and smaller stations, you end up doing a lot of different roles. So it's helpful to know the news part and the announcing. So that really helped me get my foot in the door there.
Okay. Now, Keith, you mentioned that there was piles of resumes and reels on a desk. What suggestions do you have to the students to make your resume stand out?
Well, these days, I think it needs to be almost like an ad. You know, you don't want to put too much stuff in there because everybody's, that's in hiring position, and everybody that works with them, time is short. It almost needs to be social media, not that short, but think of bullet points of things that you've accomplished, things that you're proud of, things that you want to do, things, your dream job, let them, things like that. But I think a page at the most. Even if you're in the industry a long time, your resume can get longer, but I even think with that, it needs to be tightened up quite a bit.
Any other suggestions, Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to add on to that. You can also target it to the specific job you're applying for. So go back, and if there's a job description, read that, see what they're looking for, and then highlight those skills that you have in your resume.
Anything to add, Melissa?
Early on, when you don't have a lot of work experience, you should really highlight your strengths. And so that may not be, it's maybe a bullet point of meets deadlines and a hard worker who is willing to get the job done, that sort of thing. Highlight those skills you have, because on paper it will make you stand out from the myriad of other people applying for beginning jobs in the field, where they just list that they worked on several campus productions or maybe at a local station. That'll make you look a little bit different. Oh, they have skills that they want to market over just the same things that everybody has been working on, sort of thing.
Now, networking is huge in our industry. Do you think that networking, let me reword this, how big of a role do you think networking plays in our media industry, Melissa?
Networking is big, I think, in any industry. Who you know matters. I will say for me personally, so I'm the communications coordinator for the Girl Scouts. And for me, knowing people who work at the local TV, radio, and newspapers is super helpful, because I can call someone I know and say, hey, you graduated in 2007. I graduated in 2009. I need to go on and talk about Girl Scout cookies. Can I come on and talk about Girl Scout cookies? And those human connections really, really matter at the end of the day. And I also think it helps if you're looking for new jobs, because let's be honest, very few people stay in the same job for 40 years anymore. And so if you're looking for new jobs, for a place to move up, knowing people always helps. Knowing someone at the company or the organization or the station is always that one step up compared to everyone else.
Keith, do you have anything to add to that? How does networking play into getting a job?
Well, today it's a little bit easier with LinkedIn and other social media networks, where you can connect with people that are, you can join groups, like LinkedIn has groups, which I think just became private this week, so which is they're trying to get the conversation going, have people discuss it more openly in a closed group, but you can connect with people that way. But I've also up until a few years ago, I was involved with the Media Communications Association, and Madison's got a really strong chapter there, and that's a great place to meet people in person too. So, I mean, you can do things socially, but the in-person connection is great too. You could see something that they posted, like it could have been a project, and you can ask them about, what led you to this project, and ask them, show interest, and so in-person and social networking is very important.
Is there anything to add about networking?
Well, definitely agree with what they've both said about that with the social media aspect. And the radio industry definitely is very small. You'll find if you're in radio, everybody pretty much knows everybody. So it's always good, especially if you're going to a new place, because chances are there's somebody who knows you or somebody that you've worked with in the past. Another thing with the networking, in my job, it's also helpful when you're writing news stories and you're trying to find an expert. You might not know somebody that's in that story, but you might have a friend who knows somebody in the industry that you're trying to write a story about. Mm-hmm. I've used that for audio, or in the recording industry one time, for an example. I was trying to find somebody to interview, and I had a friend who worked with some recording artists, and they were able to set me up to do an interview for one of my stories.
Cool. Now that was an interesting story. I kind of like that. What other career obstacles have you had working in radio?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of any offhand now.
Keith or Melissa, do you have any career obstacles? Well, Sarah thinks.
Well, when getting into nonprofit, so obviously the Girl Scouts are a nonprofit organization. A lot of times you can't just apply for your dream job. You actually have to start in something that has no relation. So at the Girl Scouts, I started as administrative assistant, and then I moved to being a community development coordinator, which is you have a territory and you go out and you help girls join Girl Scouting, you help them get involved in the cookie program, you help them get and do all of their ceremonies and all the Girl Scout traditions. But really at the Girl Scouts and a lot of nonprofits that I know of, it's very much a culture of hiring from within. And so I came up through the ranks. I had helped out with lots of different communications things. I'd made videos for the Girl Scouts. I'd done a lot of, I always volunteered to go on the radio or television to talk about Girl Scouting. And so for me, I spent 3 years working for the Girl Scouts, not doing any media other than helping out. And that's really how I got my job, was just proving that I was a good worker, that I care about the mission, that I care about my coworkers. And that's really how a lot of nonprofits and, quite frankly, a lot of local companies work. You have to pay your dues, so to speak.
Keith, any obstacles you had?
I think I would say obstacles with challenges. Mm-hmm. I've been obviously in the industry for a long time, so things changed. The foundation you get here is great, but as you move on, technology changes. The practice, maybe not so much. The ability to produce a project, work with teams, things like that you had mentioned too. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change. That core, but I think technology has changed quite a bit. So the obstacle or challenge is, which shows interest too, is to stay on top of all the changes, all the technology. Other obstacles too are things that are out of your control, which you just have to sometimes roll with it, or just focus on your job, your project, and that's some of the challenges.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, you had some time to think now.
Yes. So definitely one of the kind of challenges with radio is a lot of times it's harder to find jobs in radio now because they've gotten so much smaller. My station right now is very much a rarity. We are one of the only live stations, 24 hours a day. We have somebody there doing live news. Most of the stations now have gone to voice tracking. So you'll come in maybe on a weekend and do a few hours, record your whole shift, and then you're done. But you're on air. You're on air for maybe 5 or 6 hours, but you really only do 2 or 3 hours of work. So it's a little challenging to try to get in there, but like Melissa was saying, once you get your foot in the door, you really need to start and get that experience. That's really going to help you over the long run. And I know a lot of times with radio jobs too, a lot of them, once they get in those positions, they're going to want to stay there. Right. So that's another obstacle that you kind of run into in this field.
All right, so now that we talked about the challenges, let's talk about the rewards. Has there been what is the most exciting or rewarding part of your job? Melissa?
For me personally, it's sharing the mission and movement of Girl Scouting. So recently I got to work on a large video production, which I don't get to do as often, but we got a large grant from the Green Bay Women's Fund, and we're serving, it's a large-scale program that's serving underserved girls in the Green Bay School District. And so these girls get hooked up with a mentor, they have programming, they get to go and do fun things that they wouldn't get to do on their own. Just a lot of cool stuff, and so we needed to report back to the Women's Fund, and our CEO asked us to create a video. And so I got to spend about 3 weeks making a video sharing the outcomes, and I got to interview the girls and interview the advocates. We did a full-on video, green screen, I got to edit. Basically I did it all, because in nonprofit that's what you do. So I wrote, I direct, I shot, I edited with our friends at the Green Bay Boys and Girls Club. And it was wonderful to get to talk to the girls and to hear how a program really changed their lives, but then to get to create that in media and to share their stories. Because at the end of the day with Girl Scouting, I'm not sharing my story. I'm not sharing my vision, I'm sharing girls' vision, the girls of northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I'm sharing their experiences and their stories, and it was so amazing to get to record this girl saying that, somebody cut her sister's hair and she, in the past, would have beat them up for it, but because she learned from her advocate that that wasn't appropriate, she doesn't do it anymore. And that's incredible. And it was so much fun for me to do that and to share that and to put it out, for all these women at the event, and then put it on YouTube and all of that stuff. It was amazing. And it's so much fun, and that is really what I love about my job.
Keith,
For me, my profession is social media and video. It's different every day, which I like it. I work on a lot of different projects in different phases, so that's great. Our company also is doing something that's important for people. Everybody has things that are important to them. Things are physical in nature too, like your home, your auto, things like that. Being an insurance company, it's hard to think of it more than a piece of paper that you get in the mail and you tuck it away. But when you need our service, our insurance, it can change lives. And what the Girl Scouts too is making an impact on people's lives, and I think we can too by providing insurance.
Sarah, any exciting aspects about your job?
Sure, I would say definitely the storytelling aspect is a big part of it. You get to talk to so many people that you never would have thought you never would have imagined, and just some of the stories that I've gotten to do were fun, just to be able to share different events and about people's lives. I know going back in the past, there's somewhere I've done, probably one of my favorite ones was I got to do a soldier's homecoming one time, and that was probably one of the best experiences ever. There was a mom there who hadn't seen her child in like a year, and her child was just a baby when she left, and when she came back, the daughter was a year old. And to do something like that and to be able to share that story was absolutely amazing.
That sounds very rewarding. All right, what advice do you all have for students who are nearing graduation, and how to make the transition from going into a media student position into becoming, a media professional? Melissa, do you have any advice?
I would say, if you have your heart set on going out to LA or New York or even Chicago for that matter, you can really specialize, right? You can become an editor or a director or a writer or whatever. But if you're looking to stay here, you cannot be a one-trick pony. It's just, it's not in the cards. Because in the jobs around here, and there is nothing wrong with wanting to stay here. That is something I wish someone would have said to me when I was here, because so many of the students around me were like, I'm going to LA. And that's awesome, and I think LA is incredible, and I think New York is incredible, and Chicago, but that was never for me. That's not what I wanted. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to stay here, but you have to hone all the skills. And that includes the media skills, but it also includes the writing. It includes the interpersonal, the team aspect, being able to work on a team, being able to manage projects, being able to see the big picture of something, because that's something I found in the workplace that not everybody possesses, is the ability to see a big picture, which you really learn in media, because you have to see the small stuff, but you also have to see, the forest through the trees. And so if you're looking to stay here, you need to have more than one skill.
How did you make that transition into become from a media student to a media professional?
For me, it was just jumping in, like just jumping in. I think when you're here, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can sometimes get an inflated sense of self, right? Like I had a radio show, or I ran my Titan TV show, or I won an award, or whatever it is. And then when you become a media professional, you kind of have to go back to the beginning again and just jump in and be willing to be the low person on the totem pole and be willing to pay your dues. And so for me, that's really what it was just saying, all right, well, I'm in this and I'm going to do it.
All right, well, in a few moments, we're going to start taking questions from our studio audience. If you have any questions for our panel, there's a mic in the back. And if you are listening on WRST 90.3 or watching on Titan TV, feel free to use the hashtag RTF Pro, and we'll get your questions to the panelists. All right, but first, let's talk about your areas of expertise one more time, just to make sure. Sarah, you are an announcer and news reporter, and becoming you're an anchor. So
Yeah.
tell us how someone moves up in your industry.
So in mine, it's more about the experience. You have to start on the lower end, even if it's, part-time, or like I said, where I started working in a station that might not be exactly what you want to do. So I started off in announcing, but having that news part on the side, and then I was able to develop more of my news skills and focus, and then move up into a news position. So you might be surprised, not starting off exactly where you want to be, but gather those radio skills as you go.
All right, and Melissa, over the course of your career, your job has shifted to more of an online outreach opposed to a traditional media. Which do you think is more important for students to focus on?
I think it depends on what you want to do. If you do want to go into traditional media, then you should learn the basics, the skills, the processes, because like what Keith said, the programs you're using are always changing. But learning how to edit or how to direct or how to do whatever it is you want to do is important. The how, not the tools are secondary. But for me, if you are looking at working in a like corporate industry or nonprofit, online is where it's at, because for the most part, online is free. And when it's free, you have to be very good at it because everybody else is doing it too.
All right, and Keith, over the course of your career, you have been involved in a lot of different innovative areas. What do you recommend for keeping up with the latest technology?
For me, I just read a lot every day, and it's trade magazines, online trade magazines. It's meeting and discussing things with people within American Family. The social media team that I work with is just amazing. The media center team, which I came from, is amazing. And actually, you're talking about skill sets. We do have editors that are just fabulous, and they really have focused on that. And then there's others that are more generalist and run projects. So as far as recommendations, there was a couple different routes that you can take, as you mentioned. You can specialize, and in some cases you need to go to a bigger market. And there you need to really hone your skills and learn everything you can about editing or lighting, the audio, because when you're at that level, they want the best of the best. And if you want to become more of a multi-skilled, you're not an expert at everything. Like, I'm not an expert at anything, honestly. But I think I know a fair amount across the board, which for me has helped me stay in the area. I'm from Green Bay. I like Madison. Stayed, within this area with my general knowledge. That's worked for me.
All right, so let's start moving on to questions. We have our first one already lined up.
Hi, my question is for Keith. Keith, you're talking about advertising and social media. What have you found that is the most effective way to advertise on social media, and how do you interact with the consumers online?
Well, content, it's content. It's got to be good content, and it's got to be relevant to who you're reaching out to. You know, if you're reaching out to, let's say you're using LinkedIn, which we do too, and you want to reach small business, you have to create content that is important to them, things that they're going to want to spend time reading. So it could be tips about your, you know, running your small business. It could be tips about, you know, taxes, things like that. And if you send that content out to small business, it's more relative to them, and that'll lead to engagement. You know, they might have some more questions, like, you know, you said something about this particular item, can you tell me more? And then they'll start a conversation. We also do a lot of content about people's dreams, you know, so our content is about getting people to think about what they want to do in life and what's important to them. And, you know, we tell stories, you know, we cover people that are in small business or, you know, have a bakery or what have you. We do storytelling. So, you know, we don't focus that particular set of content towards small business, although it could you know, resonate with them too. But think about who you're sending it out to, who's your audience, and design your content around that.
Hi, my question's for all of you. When you guys graduated, did you know what field of media exactly you wanted to go into, or did you kind of just go with the flow and figure it out as you went?
I personally was not quite sure where I wanted to end up, but I knew I was headed towards I wanted to head towards like a management role, so like working at a station, and then I really found out that I wanted to be in a nonprofit, in a people-serving organization, so then it shifted to me figuring out how media could work there.
I don't know, give it a shot.
Sure.
Give me a few minutes to think about that.
For me, definitely, I knew I wanted to go into radio. I had that TV background a little bit too, just in case I couldn't find something in radio, because as I mentioned, it is hard to find a starting job in radio at sometimes. But definitely radio was where I knew I wanted to be.
I did go with the flow because, you know, you really don't know. I knew I wanted to go back to my hometown and actually get into a TV station, but as far as what I would do, even if it was on the creative side or news side or whatever, whatever came up, I would try to, you know, tackle that and see if I could do a good job with it, and go from there. So, you know, I think set plans. There's a lot to be said about set plans too, and lining up the tactics behind those plans, and, you know, do this step, next step. You know, there's a lot to be said about that, but I've just kind of flowed in a way, I'd say.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Ben.
My question that I have is really for all of you. It's just with some of your career paths, what you're doing right now, like the Girl Scouts and all that, do you work with organizations too, other than your own or with your own outside of the state then too? And how often do you do that, or how is that maybe different than just locally, if you're with local compared to out of state?
Yeah, Girl Scouting is, so there are about 100 councils throughout the country. And we have what I affectionately refer to as like the mothership, Girl Scouts of the USA, which is GSUSA, and they kind of set the tone. So like if you go and buy a badge book to like a Girl Scout Junior, a Girl's Guide to Girl Scouting, that's really set by Girl Scouts of the USA, excuse me. And so we sort of facilitate, they send us stuff all the time. They have all kinds of like media kits, but we really pick the direction of our local council. There are other councils in the state of Wisconsin, so if you grew up in the Milwaukee area, there's GSYs, then there's Badgerland and Manitou, and we do work with them. Our office is on a beautiful nature preserve, so they all get together and meet there, and we talk about different ways that we can work together. Girl Scouting as a whole really works together. I don't know how that is for you.
We actually have a community investment area, so our company, you know, volunteers a lot of our employees across the 19 states that we operate. We do a lot of volunteering in one way or another. And we also provide, in some cases, financial support to some organizations, like United Way, but there's quite a few different ones that we get involved with. That's more of a communications, public relations function versus marketing, at least where I work. But we do, as a company and as individual employees, we're involved with a lot of outside organizations.
And yeah, with my station, we're actually part of a larger company. We're owned by Scripps, which is one of the largest media ones in the nation. So we can occasionally work with other stations within that media group to get audio and stories. If there's a story that breaks out east, we we'll certainly get story or audio from other stations. We can also share with. We have some other stations in the state that we share stories with too.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are all out of time. I'd like to thank the talented members of the panel, Melissa, Keith, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and helping us with our career paths into the media industry. I'd also like to thank the RTF professors and students who are contributing to the production of this year's Pro Perspectives panel. And finally, thank you for joining us live on 90.3 WRST FM Oshkosh and Titan TV channel 97-57. I'm Regan Wallander, and this has been the 7th annual Radio TV Film Pro Perspectives panel at UW Oshkosh. We'll see you again next year.